All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining us with this climate change and the future of snow sports. Tonight, we're going to be talking about sustainability, what skiers are doing to be more sustainable. And we're going to talk about wildfire resilience with a couple of experts in the industry, Gwen Howat with Mount Baker and John Rice, now the president of Ski California. But before we start, I wanted to show you something that happened almost 5 years ago exactly, to 2 days ago. So today's Tuesday. This happened 5 years ago from last Sunday. So we were very fortunate that happened on Monday, September 7th. Why do I say fortunate? I say we. It's when I was at Mount Hood Meadows. Because there was a campfire that was unattended along the Timberline Trail, and they saw it around 4:30 in the morning and got eyes on it by about 7 o'clock. Now, these are the winds for that day, for Monday. And we had a hotspot team there, and the first helicopter in the air was probably by about 9 o'clock, about here. And we had about 4 helicopters that were involved with this, which was pretty amazing for our fire, which was about 2 acres at that point in time. And by that afternoon, they had found water sources, were pumping water on it, and we were assisting with uplift. And it was a great effort for what was a relatively small fire at that time, right? But take a look what happened to the winds here. By later in the day, they could no longer fly helicopters because it was too windy. And it would have also been kicking up the fire. In fact, what happened across the rest of the state of Oregon, and this is September 9th, was all of these wildfires going on that got kicked up the night of September 7th into September 8th. Had Mount Hood Meadows not already had the resources applied to contain our little fire in Jack's Woods, it would have been pulled to other places in the state, because what happened was this Lion's Head fire, the Riverside fire, the Beachy fire, they all grew into one complex, and it was huge. And all the resources would have been diverted from our fire up here to other places. And when you look at the winds, and you can see where the prevailing winds were coming from, blowing all that smoke that way, Jack's Woods is, going to be on the east side of the Mount Hood Meadows permit area. and that fire would have swept right through the permit area. It would have been like the first major fire to strike a ski area dead on. And it was it was the worst summer for wildfires in Oregon's history. 11% of the Oregon Cascades burned in that 3-day period because of the strong offshore downslope winds. Unprecedented compound extremes because of how dry everything was, and then the meteorology. These winds were just enormous, and it spread the fire so quickly. There are very large fires in Western Oregon since 1900, but they generally occur during these east wind events and at the end of these warm, dry summers. So not unusual, but this was spectacular in comparison. So 2020 was the worst Oregon wildfire season to date. Killed at least 11 people. 40,000 people were evacuated, about 500,000 people in evacuation warning areas, including our house here, which is a suburb of Portland. The fire was within 2 miles of our house. Had it crossed the Clackamas River, we would have been one of the 40,000 people that were evacuated. That close to Portland. Burned over 1 million acres of land, destroyed thousands of homes, and basically decimated the cities of Phoenix, Talent, Detroit, Indiana, and Gates. They were destroyed. So, that happened in 2020. Mount Hood Meadows was very fortunate to not be in the direct line of that fire. We were able to get to it. But a year later,
Rob, we finally have an update.
Well, it's understandable when you're trying to assess what happened to Sierra-at-Tahoe, because you have to remember that this is the first ski resort really in the world that took a direct hit from a huge wildfire. And to try and process what happened to the equipment, to the trees, to the terrain, to everything, it was going to take some time. So let's go back and show you what happened to Sierra-at-Tahoe back when the Caldor fire made its run toward the Tahoe Basin. In the very beginning, firefighters were pretty confident at various points they were going to be able to pinch this fire off, and there was no way it could make it up the ridge and take a direct hit to Sierra-at-Tahoe. But that, in fact, did happen. Now we're learning, as I'll show you some of the stats that were released yesterday by the general manager, John Rice, here at Operation Sierra Storm, that the damage was indeed very, very major. 6 of the 9 lifts were damaged by this. And to just get one lift up and running, it takes years and years and years, let alone to assess the damage and then get it running again with very limited supplies, as we all know with the supply chain. 80% of the trees for the whole resort on U.S. Forest Service land are damaged or destroyed and need to be taken down because it's a risk to the future skiers and snowboarders. And finally, the biggest thing which could affect the whole industry is now there's an insurance claim. They do have insurance. They've got to go through all the equipment, everything they need to get back to be up and running, and this has never been processed at this scale. So every resort, not only in the United States, but in North America, which are all at risk because they're all in these prime zones surrounded by very flammable material like giant trees and in terrain that could easily be affected by forest fires, they're going to figure out what happens with Sierra-at-Tahoe. All the insurance is going to be adjusted to the future risk of something like this that happened here in the Tahoe Basin happening somewhere else. He described to me, I'm back out here live at Heavenly Village, he described to me that he has gone through all the various stages that you go through, denial, grief, and now he's at the stage of acceptance. What he's revealing to everybody is they have a plan that they think they could be up and running in spring. They could get a fuel list going, they could get the positive energy going, they're going to continue to do all the work they need to do through the summer, and they expect and they hope they could be fully back open with all those lifts next season. Back to you.
Yeah, it's a process, and they got to get all those dead or dying trees out of there too, so there's still some cleanup stuff to do. Okay, Rob, thank you.
So our guests this evening to talk about sustainability and to also talk about wildfire resilience are John Rice with Ski California. We'll be talking to him in a moment, but we're going to kick off with sustainability at ski areas. And that's going to be our expert, Gwen Howat. She's a strategic advisement on projects, past president, CEO, leading innovative sustainability efforts to significantly reduce the resort's carbon footprint. So welcome everybody. Gwen Howat, how are you doing, Gwen?
I'm doing well, but I'm a little bit like still recovering even from those 2 videos, because anyone in the business, you know, I think you see that, or you can, John, my heart goes out to you in that moment in a big way, you know. And Dave, even with the near miss at Mountain Hood Meadows, you know, Matthew, Drake, and I, you know, have our colleagues over the years, and it's a lot. And, you know, what Sierra sustained there, of course, caught everyone's attention, but I also have a deep empathy for the people who are standing there in the moment and navigating, you know, any of us in the mountains, when we navigate something significant like that. I think it's only those of us in the business maybe who can really understand the scope and the breadth of the toll that takes on the crew and on ourselves and all that. But then again, how that's also buoyed by the pure passion and the enthusiasm that, you know, the public has for these places, and their commitment to and support of us getting back on our feet whenever it requires that. So anyway, it's hard to segue from that, frankly, but I look forward to, you know, to hearing more about it. And, you know, I will say that if I can put any kind of a positive thing on it, you know, those of us even very tangentially, you know, remotely connected to that, have taken those lessons that you and others have passed on, and you know, hopefully implemented them in earnest in our own organizations, and or continue to learn from all of that. So
we'll definitely be talking to John about that.
Yeah.
But I think some of the other things that the industry is doing is taking sustainability to heart, taking climate change to heart.
Yeah.
You know, I have a little image of a little canary in a coal mine, and he's decked out in ski attire. He's got little goggles, little ski hat, skis. And, you know, we are a very small portion of a problem, but we're also looked at as leaders in sustainability practices. And, you know, we want to talk to you about Mount Baker, the overall of the generator systems for centralized power, renewable transition. I got to thinking about that. That's probably something you're doing for your local guests. It's not like, well, we're just trying to reduce energy costs or become more sustainable. When you're at the mercy of the power company for delivering your electricity to run your lifts, and something happens, you can be a lot more sustainable if you've addressed those issues. Is that part of what you're trying to accomplish there?
Oh, well, first of all, for context, I don't know how many, just for orientation for some of you, is, you know, Mount Baker, we're at the end of a 2-lane road. We're the northernmost ski area in the North Cascades, and we're at the end of a dead end of a 2-lane road. We're an hour and a half from the nearest metropolitan town, which is Bellingham. And we are 100% off the grid. So we have remained 100% off the grid because of our remoteness. And interestingly enough, I don't know if this directly answers your question, Dave, but in reality, sustainability has actually also played in to our own economic benefit all along because of being off the grid. So that somewhat forced a mindset to be how can we conserve, because conserving resources was literally, and how can we become more efficient, because that literally led to a direct correlation often to a financial outcome for us. So we adopted like no idling policies in the morning with our chairlifts long ago, like in the 70s and 80s, you know. Same with snowcats and our, you know, lot equipment and things like that, because it all just added up. And then, you know, of course, we started to become more aware of emissions and the realities of diesel. And there were some kind of, I would say I may have jumped the gun, so to speak, on the attempts with biodiesel, because we also run generators in the summertime to generate our power. So I was at least trying to initially get in on biodiesel for that, which made sense at the time, but there were no ASTM standards at the time we tried it, and there were no consistencies with the blending process. And that actually created some challenges down the road from an accountability standpoint on the reliability of the product. I haven't revisited in earnest yet, because we still, in our environment, we still have some real challenges with gelling. And so we work directly here with our refineries in terms of winter blends and what those blends really look like. And we actually had a challenge even just a couple of years ago with an unusually cold spell. We're talking about potential warming in the climate, but we also have had unusually cold snaps. Like in my lifetime, we've had some incidences just in the last couple of years that have been what I would call unseasonably cold for the North Cascades. So we hit, I mean, to you guys in Colorado, you're probably going to laugh, but we all freak out when it hits below zero. So we're at like -13, -15, things like that. But what for us creates an issue is that the winter blend that goes out in our community, you know, doesn't necessarily plan for that. So this is kind of another side of climate potentially, is that there's a long-standing preparation within industry for cold climates, and some of those things are being affected as well. Anyway, what I would say is we've had a, how shall I say, bit of a shotgun approach to sustainability and bitten off pieces as we could financially afford, and always have measured it first and foremost in terms of how does it make things operationally, does it streamline operations? Does it facilitate a better experience for the customer, the visitor? And does it make economic sense and environmental sense? So, you know, we do everything from, we use grass-fed beef in all our hamburgers from locally sourced people. I went down to a local bakery one day and I said, you know, we do 30,000 burger buns a year and I'm shipping them from Seattle via one of the major food service suppliers. So I went down to one of our local bakeries and asked one of the women there, I'm like, do you think you can make 30,000 burger buns? And she was like, we'll figure out a way. And they actually, 2 of our local bakeries have now employ 5 people a year through the winter that they wouldn't have normally employed, because we've shifted our business to more local and we have direct relationships with them that way, so we can really tailor the products. So, you know, the buying power with ski areas is significant in terms of how you can leverage that into sustainability, I would call that, because, you know, we're trucking less product from farther distances. So there's that actual reality, and we have more control over the product, and we're actually supporting a local economy that is then becomes more loyal and I guess facilitating to us in the long run. So we've developed a lot of those type of relationships over the years, and everything from the farmers who grow beef and the sources for our burgers to the buns, and then composting. You know, we started composting way back when, because like most places, well, I don't know about, in our reality is we have to ship everything off site. So we haul every bit of waste off the mountain, an hour and a half of a drive. And in the wintertime in your Highland, as you all know, people in their 20s driving large vehicles down a snowy mountain road, you want to minimize those number of trips for a variety of reasons. And so we implemented a composting system long ago. And I'm actually working now on trying to figure out how to do a digester and things like that on site to even take that step one more further. But yeah, so, and electricity, we've converted everything to low use over time, because we saw a direct impact when we are actually generating the power. We saw a direct impact on more efficiency. So all those, and it's something that can be built over time, I would say, but a slow and steady wins the race for us, I guess, is what it's been. And so instead of saying like, oh, I've got to do some grandiose plan, we've just chipped away at the places where it made sense. And now collectively, 15 years down the road, it adds up to be a pretty significant package, I guess you would say. And to top all that off, so our chairlifts traditionally have been diesel powered. And we took the approach that instead of having a prime mover and an auxiliary, we have always had two primes, so that we always had redundancy given the remoteness in the environment of our place. And so we recently, in one particular, we have 2 base areas and kind of 2 distinct sides to the mountain. And we have 8 chairlifts, by the way, and 2 base areas, 3 lodges. And we recently, on one, what we call the white salmon side of the mountain, which is our main area that we run 7 days a week. And then the upper base area, we supplement with weekend and holiday operation. Anyway, we recently removed one of the diesel engines and replaced it. Skytrack helped us replace with electric motors. And then phase one was to then power 3 lifts plus 1 lodge out of one centralized diesel generator. And now this summer, what we're doing is we're building a power generation facility at the White Salmon Base area. Next year is probably when we're going to install a system, which is typical, but I guess now with a system of generators of all different sizes that are all tier 4, latest technology, all of that, that will automatically modulate to demand. And we're looking at reducing our emissions by over 80%.
Wow. That's, that's one of the things you mentioned, that you have a decision-making process, and basically what's best for the community, what's best for the ski area, saving money is part of that, becoming more efficient is part of that. Have you redefined what success means now at a ski area, or, how you're measuring the return on the investment, more than just financially, but environmentally and even culturally?
Yeah, well, absolutely. And I think, maybe I don't know, for those of you that maybe know a little bit about Mount Baker's culture, I think that that's something that, my dad and I have been in management here together for 35 years. He came here in 68 and was here for 57 years before his recent retirement. And what we got to do was use, I guess you would say, also culture. We factored in culture and the environment into our decision making in an era where, it wasn't talked about as much. Basically, triple bottom line concepts is what we were living, but we were doing it because we knew that we were very dependent on a local community. We don't have a large metropolitan area to draw from for our business. And so we had to connect. We had to develop loyalty, and we also had to develop a sense of place. And these practices, all those practices contribute in some way to that, I think, in terms of our community and what our community cares about. And so we just chipped away at it, and measuring success became a component of not just the bottom line on a financial statement, which of course is important, but it became a component of also, returning pass holder success, number of, lift ticket growth, of dedication of our vendors, because, when we need help, and we have a lot of people to draw on. So we have dedicated supportive vendors. We have dedicated supportive community, because we reciprocate that and as best as we can when we can. So sustainability also became, I think, besides just the environmental component of it, community and an economic component within our county. And so measuring success always still had to come down to, financial success, because that's the lifeblood of any organization. But it also helped us carve out a niche as Whistler developed and as other larger, conglomerates came in around us. It helped us also, these kind of initiatives and care for the environment, care for the community, and that perception also helped us create, our own sense of place and our own niche in the industry. So
just before we started, you were talking a little bit about some things at the federal level regarding potential sale of public lands, or even just the recognition of where the money revenues come from for use of the current public lands. Could you talk a little bit about that, just so we understand in context the importance of what we're providing as recreation providers?
Yeah, I mean, it's a segue topic a bit, but so I'm on the National Skiers Association Board of Directors as well. And I am on the Public Lands Committee. And when the Big Beautiful Bill recently was proposed, and there was a proposal in it from primarily from the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee for the possibility of selling off some of the public lands on national forest and BLM land in particular. And Mount Baker, by the way, does exist on the Mount Baker Snoqualmie National Forest. So we're very deeply involved in our relationship with the Forest Service. And anyway, what we came to learn was that they're really, in the final language of the bill that was being proposed for the vote, which it had already passed the House. So now it's in the Senate's hands. And there really was no exclusion, no clear exclusion for the sale of existing permitted areas on public lands. So this was deeply concerning. And so the National Skiers Association group, we got together and hammered peppered the Senate and Senate committee, and then also every member. Like I sent letters to every single member of the Energy and Natural Resources Committee, all our local constituents, all of that. And basically at the 11th hour, they dropped the language. But we're going back next week. Coincidentally, a group of us are going back to DC next week and hoping to meet. Well, we are meeting with Geraldine Link and others. Grant Colvin have set up meetings with the USDA Undersecretary. We were going to meet with Secretary Rollins, but she has going to international travel going on. And we're going to meet with the Deputy Chief, Chris French of the United States Forest Service, to continue to advocate for public lands. And a lot of these initiatives that we're doing, sustainability wise, is we can just show good intention, authentic good intention on behalf of our industry, is actually very helpful in these conversations. I would say at this level that, hopefully affects policy.
It should recognize the importance of recreation on public lands.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. So thank you for asking that. So a statistic that we utilize is that last year, 2024, and I might be off 1 or 2 percentages here, but I think I'm pretty close on it, is that in terms of the revenue generated on national forest land, that timber represents about 37% of the total pie of what's generated on national forest land. And I don't know how many of you know this, but the vast majority of that goes back to the general fund. It does not stay on the local forests. And 37% is generated by timber and 47% is generated by recreation. So in terms of our public lands, recreation actually is a larger revenue generator overall than timber on forest lands.
Well, taking a look, maybe summing this up, what's next for Mount Baker in as far as sustainability goes? Any new projects you're looking at?
Well, yes, I've actually spent the last couple of years doing a feasibility project. There is a privately owned hydro facility not far from our ski, well, not far, 14 miles to be exact. So it is pretty far from the ski area. And I did a feasibility, we actually did a feasibility study back in the 90s. And then I just recently updated it to try and do an underground line that runs from that facility, which is large enough to power the ski area, up the highway. So minimizing all the environmental impacts and all that. Plus also, as many of you who have electrical lines probably in the mountain environment, you know that that's pretty tricky when trees blow down and all that. So the feasibility study is to run the line up the road to the mountain, and then we would be off the grid 100% on renewable energy, which would be amazing. I just need about $20 to $30 million.
Well, we're gonna pass the hat.
So pass the word around to some philanthropist who wants to do a really good the high vis project in terms of an off the grid ski area that's now 100% sustainable, and I have got the project for them.
That's awesome. We will have time for some questions for Gwyn a little bit before we a little bit later in the presentation. But right now, I wanted to bring in John Rice, president of Ski California. He's the former GM of the Sierra-at-Tahoe. He led the resort through the Caldor fire. He now drives wildfire resilience efforts across the state. And at the risk of a little more trauma for John, I wanted to show another video.
Welcome back. And one of Tahoe's local favorites, Sierra-at-Tahoe, is set to reopen this weekend. Actually, this is their opening weekend, but it was devastated by the Caldor fire in August of 2021. I was there as the fire came up over the hill and burned many of the resort's trees. This week, I went back up there to find out what it's taken to rebuild this resort. Take a look.
A homecoming on the slopes, many months in the making.
We're really, really stoked to be able to welcome people back home.
Shelby Dunlap says Sierra-at-Tahoe hasn't looked like the time-honored and beloved resort you see today. In recent months, looking more like a construction zone after the mountain was devastated by the Caldor fire in August 2021. ABC 10 was there as the flames grew in the distance and smoke filled the air.
I hope the winds don't do what they're predicted to do.
General Manager John Rice's worst fears came to pass. Many of the old-growth pine groves that make Sierra-at-Tahoe so special were wiped out from the West Bowl area of the mountain, leaving crews with a huge job.
Where we were at just over a year ago, we didn't know if it was going to be possible.
The burned trees pose a safety risk. They can fall, so they had to be felled. By August of this year, more than 5 million board feet of timber were removed from the mountain.
We were doing just so much work, and now that we've got to this point, it feels like a really big moment for us, and we're really celebrating that we've been able to get here and welcome our guests back home.
Mother Nature brought the goods for Sierra-at-Tahoe's opening weekend. 19 inches of snow, with much more on the horizon.
The snow forecast is looking really promising for the next couple weeks.
A good omen for a homecoming on the slopes.
So, John, I kind of wanted to play that one because it's got a good ending. But can you tell us a little bit about what you were going through around August 29th, 4 years ago, and as that fire was getting towards the permit area?
Yeah, I just want to say, Gwen, great job with a model for smaller independent resorts that may not have the resources that some of the larger conglomerates have to put toward this, and getting the culture of your employees involved, and then getting your pass holders, your loyal skiers involved, just really makes a difference. You're going to hear a theme from me today about paying it forward, how important that is, establishing what matters with your people, with your employees, and then of course your guests as well. We'd had a lot of, when I felt like giving up, I just had to go take a walk and hear from our employees. They wanted to bring it back, and so did our guests, despite how it looked. The ownership at one point came a couple days after the fire and saw the ground still smoking and trees still on fire. I mean, the fire burned for a month after it went through us.
Wow.
And I heard one of the owners on the phone going, "It's game over. That's it. We're done. It's game over." Talking to the Forest Service, they're like, "Yeah, we'll probably close the forest for 5 years and let Mother Nature do its thing." And so that was the lowest of points. So the comeback was certainly working with our team. I had one major setback in that my mountain manager, who I was planning on kind of retiring. I'd been in the business over 45 years. I was ready to call it, and I had a guy mentored up and trained, ready to go. And he fell, hit his head, and unfortunately passed away 9 days later while we were halfway through our rebuild. So I was left without, my main guy, and the guy that was constantly saying, it just might be better when we bring it back. And we needed sort of a rallying cry that became an important thing that I had to go look in the mirror and say, hey, people are looking at my, body language, and they want to know how I'm feeling, and do I have hope? And the employees are looking at me too. So I had to make sure I had my game face on when I went outside, despite what I was feeling. And anyway, there's a good story behind how we got there. But I'm an elected official here in our town, on our local fire department. I'm chair of our fire board. So when this fire first started, it was a small fire down in Grizzly Flats, the town of Grizzly Flats. I was able to go to the meetings in Placerville, which is about 45 minutes away, and participate in the incident command as a member of Lake Valley Fire. And I had my fire hat and shirt, and I also brought my fire plan with me, which at that time our National Skiers Association had on their website listed as the model wildfire prevention plan. So I guess maybe that was fate too, but we had a great plan. I stole from every other resort that I thought had some good information, and put together a really solid plan of all of our resources, of all the relationships that we had built, contracts that were in place, where all the facilities, what they were constructed of, what kind of roofs they had, where the fire fighting equipment lived, utility shutoffs, fuel shut. I had it all in this beautiful plan. Well, the fire didn't follow the plan, so there was that. But I will just say that when each day going down, and about a week prior to the fire getting to us, I kept hearing from everyone there, don't worry, the fire's not going to get to you. It's not going to get to you. It's fine. We got this. It's a small fire. We got this. But there were diurnal winds where the winds were going down hill at night about 5 miles an hour and turning around, coming back up canyon about up to anywhere 15 to 20 during the day. So the time to really hit this thing hard would have been at night. The challenge was the Dixie Fire was raging north of us. That fire consumed towns. I mean, schools, businesses, houses, you name it. That fire was 2 million acres in size. The resort acreage is about 2,000. Of course, the Caldor fire in total burned about 220,000 acres. But just to give you context, all the equipment and the people and the energy were up at the Dixie Fire at that time. So at the incident command center, they were calling for the big iron and were being told, sorry, it's all in play up on the Dixie. And so we were a little bit starved on resources. So that was tough. The other challenge for me at going to those meetings was listening to CAL FIRE, who's our state fire folks, and Forest Service saying that they were a joint command, and Cal OES, Emergency Services, was also there. And for the PR, they were telling everyone, we're all one fire team working together in this. The reality was, as soon as the media left and the fire people would go in the back room and kind of the war room, they were yelling at each other. They were arguing about strategy, disagreeing on a lot of things. And, that was disheartening for me because they really weren't united on the early part of this fire. And again, they were resource starved. So that was tough. There were some other things that happened that, I had a lot of media ask me, was this climate change caused this? Well, you can say climate change had something to do with the fuel buildup and the humidity and a lot of those other issues that were based on climate. But I will say that forest policies of the last prior 30 years certainly played into it. The initial plans and strategies, I'm not questioning anyone, and being in the fire service, we don't question each other, but definitely maybe didn't take serious enough the threat that this thing could spot the way that Dixie Fire was spotting 2 to 5 miles ahead. So let's say they go in and bring all their dozers in, we're going to build a containment line, we're going to backfire this. And then before they even get finished, the fire's already spotted over them, and it's already started new spot fires that were then, collecting. The night before it hit Sierra, it was in a small town called Strawberry right down the hill, probably 2 miles from the resort. I was in the West Bowl in the direction where it was coming. I could see the, the thermocumulus clouds, but also that morning they were setting backfires down in Strawberry into the wind. So they're putting the candles into the wind and fire's coming at them. Anyway, I obviously couldn't say much about my feelings on how the fire was initially fought, but when I realized that we were in the path, we did everything possible to follow our own plan in terms of, making sure that we had put everything away. The big mistake we made was putting all of our equipment in the brick building. So all the buildings were either stick frame or tents, fabric, but we had one that was CMU block, and that was our upper shop. And we felt, okay, we got a metal roof, we've got CMU block. Let's put all of our snowcats, let's put our $600,000 winch in there. Let's put all of our snowmobiles. Let's put all the expensive stuff in there. The guys left all their tools in there. And that's the one building that burned to the ground. It was a $10 million rebuild, just to give you an idea of what was in there and, the cost of reconstruction in today's world. Trying to source equipment after losing it at a time, still, trying to find parts and stuff from Canada and snow removal stuff after COVID was tough, and we're still kind of recovering from that. So that was a challenge. But as it came in, I will say that I thought, well, we got a chance. We got the lifts running. We're doing all the right stuff. The fires that have hit ski areas in the past pretty much ran through little fingers. We had our snowmaking system on. We had our hoses in all the buildings. We did everything we could. We did have a group from AIG, that our insurance carrier, that sent out a wildland prevention crew. There was 3 units, and they were ex-CAL FIRE and Forest Service employees who knew what they were doing and helped us with defensible space. They showed us where the stuff collects under the stairs. That's where the spark's going to hit and torch that building, not the stuff you moved away from the front. So it was really educational to kind of learn events and all that kind of stuff. But they also used a product called thermogel, which you can buy. And it was someone years ago looked at fires and said, what didn't burn after fires? And they were digging through dumpsters and everything else, and they found that baby diapers didn't burn. Now, it wasn't the material in the baby diaper from the baby. It was the gel that was in the diapers. They made a slurry out of it. They put it on a wall and put a torch on it. It didn't burn. So they said, we should commercialize this. They did. This group brought it with them. Everything they sprayed with thermogel, and it washes off with water, did not burn. The ugliest buildings that we have that I wanted to burn did not burn. Around and burned. I mean, the gas cans outside my office didn't burn, no. But anyway, the point is that was something that was, wow, there is actually something. It's non-toxic. It's not bad for the environment that you can put on as a fire retardant, and it works really well. The other issue we had was in terms of trying to prepare, once they called evacuation orders in our area, we were down to like 4 employees. So it was tough. I was sneaking people through because I had my fire pass, and I had a friend with the California Highway Patrol that was getting me through all the roadblocks and things to get there, to do everything we could. I said, I'm the last guy to leave. And then, the day of, it came in about 2:00. The Forest Service finally showed up the night before the fire hit the resort. They showed up and said, can we stage here? And I'd been offering them to stage this whole time prior, every day, giving them my plan, whatever. Someone said, stop wearing your fire stuff, wear your ski stuff. They all know your ski area. And so I went down there with my ski hat, and I had my plan in hand, like trying to hand it out. Nobody would talk to me because I wasn't a fire guy, I was a ski guy. So, and plus I think they all knew it was going to get to us. But I could just tell you that, it went through, and the lifts were still standing. Some of the buildings were still standing. And I thought, wow, maybe it's not that bad. And then I realized when I looked at damage and some of the fire weakened trees, where you could literally go up with your finger and push over a 200-foot tall pine tree that was burned in the core all the way up next to a beginner trail. I realized our real problem was hazard trees. Had a pretty incredible story of how we were able to work with the agency, work with the Forest Service, work with multiple agencies. State of California Tourism happened to have a Christmas tree that year was going to be on the White House lawn, and they were going to DC for the tree lighting. And there were several Forest Service meetings that were taking place as a result. And so when I went to the Forest Service, I said, look, I need, you guys got to help us with it. They said, look, your special use permit, it's really clear. We can't help you. Sorry. You guys are responsible. I said, well, I looked up in the dictionary ski area, and it says group of ski lifts. And I made this up. And I said, I looked up forest, it said group of trees. So you guys do the trees, we'll do the lifts. And they said, no, we're not responsible for anything. We had a meeting, we got them all in a circle. I went around the circle and I said, tell me about your experience and your relationship with Sierra. And the first gal wearing Forest Service attire says, I worked here back in the day. I was a lift operator. I love this place. I've been skiing here ever since. Next guy says, oh yeah, well, I've had a pass here for 15 years. This is my home resort. That went on all the way around the room, except for the last guy who said, I'm the one guy that hasn't worked here before or doesn't have a pass, but I work at a ski area in the winter at another place. So I get it. And then at that time, our forest district ranger said, we've got to do something. I learned how to ski here. I don't know what it is, but we got to figure something out. So with him, we came up with a plan to find a way to get a nonprofit in front of us, because the Forest Service did not want to fund a public, land place with a private business. That went against everything. But I went to DC on that trip. I was able to talk to our key legislators in our state. The Dianne Feinstein was incredibly strong, helpful, and because we had pretty much got everything, but being at those Forest Service meetings was unbelievable, because they're like, you again? Like, why are you always here? And I finally said, I'm just trying to get funding, and I know that Biden said there's money that's been sent out for this recovery effort, and I'm just trying to see if we can't get some approval. The other thing the Forest Service did for us is fast-tracked our NEPA, which was amazing. And out of Colorado Region 2 took on the NEPA and literally in like 3.5 months did a full environmental impact report for us that allowed us to go in, get rid of all the, the hazard trees and do the work we needed to do. Because the environmental damage from the fire is way worse than anything you can imagine in terms of what kind of damage it does. Now, we do not, Sierra flows towards Sacramento. It doesn't flow toward Tahoe. But when this fire crested the Sierras, it's the second fire ever to crest the Sierras. The first one was the Dixie Fire north of us. The concerns of what could happen, because it went through Kirkwood as well, and it also, a section of Kirkwood, and it went toward Heavenly. And Heavenly did the same thing, flipped on all their, snowmaking equipment, which they had much more robust system than us. But they were able to finally stop it. It became the #1 fire in the United States. The other thing was interesting. Every 2 weeks, they would change the leadership of the firefighting team. So you're just getting to know the people. They're just getting to know the lay of the land. They're from other states. Like, I'm from Idaho. I'm from North Carolina. And you're like, where are the people that know the woods here? And they go, okay, well, we're out. Thanks, Team 6. It's been great. Team 2, they're taking over. And there was like a day and a half where nothing really got done. There was strategy just kind of came to a standstill while they're doing the handoff. But those are things I can say now I couldn't say before. But all I can say is it was a learning experience, and everything I learned, to your point earlier, Dave, I've tried to share back with the industry, because I think, we've had 5 fires in California, Ski California, 1 in Nevada, but 4 in the last 5 years. And so I assembled all the GMs that from those resorts this summer at a wildfire resiliency discussion at a conference we had. And I had them kind of go through, if they would, for people, what did you learn? What things can you share? I'm just pulling it up here so I can just check my notes here. But essentially what they shared was a lot of things that I didn't think about. I did those podcasts with Security Management. That was great. I was able to share some things. But like the Creek Fire in Fresno, there's another big one down there right now, right next to that. The Bridge Fire, Mountain High. Mountain High, they call me, what do we do, John? What do you do? We followed your plan. We did this, we did that. I said, call your broker, get your insurance guy there right now, document everything, take as many videos as you can. He goes, we don't have insurance. I said, what do you mean you don't have insurance? He said, yeah, we couldn't afford it because fire insurance has become just something we can't afford. So we have no insurance. It's like, oh, okay. That was a interesting one. And there's still several resorts that do not have property insurance right now because of the cost. At Sierra, just to give you an idea, our cost went from roughly $50,000 to $2.2 million in 1 year. Just to give you an idea of one of the challenges running a ski area we were talking about earlier. A couple fires in Southern California, while they didn't affect directly at a resort, it killed their summer business because they closed all the roads leading into the resort. And so down in Big Bear, they have mountain biking, they have a very big summer program with all kinds of events and Tough Mudders and things. They couldn't get people there. They couldn't get the Forest Service and our Department of Transportation to work together on finding ways in and out. That was an issue. The Davis Fire in Mount Rose, interesting thing I learned from them was don't send your people on vacation that know where the utility shutoffs are and how to run the snowmaking system during the months of August and September, if you can help it, because those are the fire seasons. And if you can at least make sure that that information is shared and passed on, if you do need to do that. In the case of Mount Rose, their ability to share their fire protection and their ponds for snowmaking with Nevada Fire made all the difference in the world of saving their resort, because it came right up the side. The Caldor Fire, I've shared a lot of keys, but real quick, having a plan is key. There's a lot of resorts that still do not have a plan. I've been working with them. I've been sharing ones like, go ahead, copy it. It's not a trade secret. Every time there's a fire, we should learn something new. We should add it to this. The fire will not follow your plan, but you've got to have a plan, have your contacts in place. And then, with your leadership team, make sure communication stays tight. because things can get sideways really fast. People make up their own stories, the media's off on some tangent. Some employee, who's got evacuated decides he's going to tell everyone what he thinks, and pretty soon the story's out of control. So you really got to watch that. Paying it forward, building trust on the front end with all the agencies. Can't say enough about that. We were able to go to DC with the California tourism people, and I had access to every single person that mattered. The chief of the Forest Service was with him, with Chris French. I was with Randy Moore, was with, Tom McClintock, Nancy Pelosi. I mean, all the people that made the decisions were there. And the relationship we had with our tourism authority is what allowed that. You would never think that would be something, but that turned out to be. Our relationship with the Forest Service was of high trust, built over 30 years that I was there. Anytime they had an initiative, we joined it as if it was our own, and we shared all our stuff with them, and that paid huge dividends. I was told that what we did, the prescription we did to fix you guys wouldn't work at another resort if we didn't have that kind of trust. So communication, again, I said, how important that is daily. We had a PR daily release. I was communicating upline with the owners every single day, just a short little thing of what's going on, where's the fire, what's happening. I would send them the stuff so they felt comfortable. And then the insurance people, but also with your employees, they need to know. Our employees were evacuated, living in campgrounds down in Nevada. We took some groceries down and had a picnic, and told them, showed them pictures and talked about what we're doing, what we're facing right now when the evacuation gets lifted, because everyone wants to help. They all want to come and help, but you don't need them when you're in the middle of a crisis like that. And so that communication was key. And then making sure on the tail end of that communication is showing gratitude and appreciation for all the people who actually did come in. Main thing I would say is focus on what you can control. Was a big learning thing. You can get spun out on all things you can't control. The government, how the firefight is happening, where the resources are. You cannot control that. You can try to advocate, but if you keep your energy for what you can control. And in my case, I had plenty of things that needed the energy that I had left over after all that. And then share the lessons learned. And that's where we're still at, and we'll continue to share what are we learning from these events. We're seeing things we've never seen before, the scope and scale of which, I will say that we need to advance our thinking. There's a lot of technology advances in firefighting, but there's a lot of 50-year-old techniques still being employed. We probably need to look at that a little bit. In one case, for example, I told you about the night. You can hit these fires at night when the wind's blowing up the other way and it's kind of knocked down, but they chose not to fly. Helicopters were sitting on the tarmac full of water, and they weren't allowed to fly because they didn't want to take a risk of an accident at night. And I said, well, how's there going to be an accident? And they said, well, there was one in 1975. And I'm like, guys, it's 2020, 21. I mean, that was 50 years ago. Times have changed. Anyway, they've got LiDAR and, they've got radar, everything else, like night vision. So long story there, all I'll say is we have to share this information back. We have to constantly be aware. We are in California. There's, I don't know how many fires are burning right now. I looked at watch duty a little bit ago. It's not going to stop. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. The resort's going to have to face this. Hopefully nobody has to go through a catastrophic loss, because they will take all the right steps. But that's been my experience with this event. And I'm trying to share with the industry and advocate. I'm going as well, Gwen, to DC next week, and we'll advocate with our legislators to continue to keep recreation as a priority and continue to think about wildfire resilience and prevention and firefighting resources, so we don't lose these precious resources that we have, because people need to recreate in this crazy world. And, the mountains are where people are going. I was reading something today about this new travel and tourism trend for cabinizing, or I forget what it was called, but it was like people want to go to a quiet place, to a river, to a campground. That's the trend. That's what's happening. We're certainly seeing that in the winter and summer, and we need our public lands to be available and open and not scarred and closed and evacuated. So I'll be advocating as well with our government, with California and with the industry, trying to share lessons learned. So,
John, thank you so much for that story. Are there any questions for either John or Gwen? Steve, you got your hand up.
I do. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
All right. Gwen was mentioned earlier about the comparison of the revenue from timber versus the revenue from recreation in our national forests. There has been an act that's been kind of going around for years now called the Shred Act, which tries to keep that recreational money local. Do you have an update on that, Gwen?
I actually do. Actually, Geraldine, John, I don't know if you have it closer to you, but Geraldine, actually good news. It died hard for a while. And then we just recently got an email this week that there's a chance that it's going to come back in play. So we'll definitely be talking about that in DC as well.
Great.
So if you've seen Dumb and Dumber, you're saying there's a chance. So this thing has been life support 3 times. It is the bill that refuses to die is now back, and we could thank our state of Utah representatives for keeping it on CPR right now.
That's a good way to describe it, I think, at this point. I haven't gone deep into the where really is it, but I think now people are starting to pay attention, and wildfire has a lot to do with that, and the statistics about recreation. If we can keep putting that in front, I think it stands a chance. But the other discussion I did mention is the consolidation of the regional district. So that's the meeting with Rollins or the USDA. They're taking these 9 regions and consolidating into 2. And so in the Pacific Northwest, anyway, we're advocating for efficiencies, developing the mountain recreation team in a little bit more robust than that, but funding it appropriately if they do that, so that it involves not only the environmental review teams, but potentially what they're talking about is also consolidating the permit administration and various other things more districts into regions. So we want to make sure that they don't do this big shift and then lose our brain trust within the Forest Service, and also don't fund it appropriately, so everybody leaves.
And they could just to move to these hubs, which would mean selling their home and leaving their kids out of school and having to move. These are people we've built relationships with over the years that should be able to stay in the district, and they could, with today's technology, could obviously still add value and be on the ground. I asked, well, what are the hubs be in California? They said, it will not be in a blue state. I mean, so you can count on that. I said, okay. So.
Alan, did I see you raise your hand there a moment ago?
Yes.
Yeah.
John, for several years, I was one of the FIS delegates. There's 17 of them from each major country. My niche was recreational skiing, although my vote was for where to have the downhill when the Hahnenkamm is running. How much interaction are you having with European or just key areas outside the country for these issues? Are you receiving information back or providing it to them?
With regard to,
well, your experience is it's riveting what you went through to fight that fire and survive it. I don't know if there are areas in Europe that are having similar problems with fire, but we just saw a glacier collapse, wipe out an entire town. They've got their problems. Is there much interaction between countries on sustainability, we'll call it? I don't know if that's the right
basically
survivability.
Alan, basically, are you sharing with international?
I've been involved in a lot of media stuff in the West. The OSS tape that Dave showed, those are meteorologists from all across the United States. A lot of interest from meteorologists in other states who had keen interest in this. But as far as other countries, I haven't had a lot of solicitation of questions or comments or anything. So, I mean, I'd be happy to share. I've got nothing to hide. It's all like I said, the more we can share, the more we can learn from our experiences. And, you know, it was healthy for me to hear just other resorts talking about what challenges they faced and what things they, you know, they all agreed, yeah, fires don't follow the plan. They go where they want to go. They do what they want to do. And there's so many factors that can change its direction, speed, whatever. So,
Sue, I see you have your hand up. You have a question and you need to unmute. You need to unmute. Still need to unmute. There you go. Nope. You unmuted, but you're muted again.
Geez,
There it is.
I'm computer challenged,
There it is.
but have a lot of history in the evergreen forests of Oregon. And I see a lot of value. I know clear cutting has gotten, but the value of the logging industry to maintain those roads, because those roads gave quick access to a lot of these areas. The other thing I see that I wish I could change, I think it's really maybe important that the Forest Service and certified people could take chainsaws to maintain the trails. Because again, this leaves easy access for the firefighters. Because, you know, these guys are carrying heavy packs, a lot of stuff, and I think that would help easy access to the fires. So, you know, there's a lot of bad stuff about all this logging, but I think clear cutting with control, and when the Forest Service gives out their permits for logging, it maybe needs to be something about maintaining the roads. So,
John, Gwen, we're a little bit over. Do you have time for a couple more questions?
Yeah, and I have a comment on that actually with something that's going on in Washington State. Go ahead, Tom, though. Tom has a question.
Actually, it was a comment for John about when he mentioned Big Bear this spring. I didn't realize we had the fire, and I was driving up, and I ended up being diverted and only get a half day of skiing because it was a 3.5 to 4 hour drive because the regular road was closed off because of the hill fire. Yeah. John, you're muted.
John's muted now.
yeah, it was killing their summer business and in their winter business as well. During the winter, what was happening below the snow line, the rains causing, because of the fire, causing all the debris on the road. And the, you know, Caltrans couldn't keep up with it, and they just said, we're closing it. The Forest Service said, yeah, we'll issue the forest closure order. And I was banging on the door in Sacramento going, no, please open it. These people need to get home, get to work. They've got their livelihood. It wasn't all just about making money. It was about quality of life for people living in that area as well. So,
Gwen, did you want to follow up with?
Yeah, just two quick follow-ups. I have a question for John, a practical note question for John, and then a quick follow-up regarding forestry. So one thing that is being developed here in our forest is responsible or selective wildfire and understory restoration, basically, which involves a fair amount of cutting of trees to restore the spaciousness that we need in the Pacific Northwest for the trees to grow. But the real issue we're facing is what to do with the biomass. And so there's a facility here in Darrington, Washington, that's actually starting to work with the Innovation in Forest Products programs. And this is going to be really important because even if we remove the biomass debris, how do we dispose of it? And so what they're developing is actually trying to figure out either innovative products to build from it, or recently I was just talking to someone actually who was at the NSAA conference about wood-fired generators that actually a couple ski areas are starting to use to actually help with the Forest Service utilizing this biomass, but doing so in a regenerative burning way. So it's basically tier 4 or greater technology. But that's one thing, if we all can start to just pay attention to, it's one thing to remove the biomass and restore our forest health, but what do we do with that biomass now is really an issue. So anyway, that's one piece. And then John, I have a quick practical question. What happened in the fire with your parking lot? Do you think the fire destroyed things like equipment or where, how would you utilize your parking lots as essentially fire breaks zones to store things potentially that may be safer than inside of buildings, or how did that go?
So all the new stuff that we put in the building was melted and gone in black. All the snow blowers we put up against the side of the brick building gone. Everything we left in the parking lots, the older stuff, fired right up. It was good to go. Parking lots are incredible fire breaks.
What I'm talking about. Okay.
You know, it was interesting when those New Mexico fires.
Oh my God, my dad is going to be so thrilled to hear this. I might even have to have him call you because we have like a 50-year standing bet on this.
Oh yeah. Oh, no question. One truck, the grill melted, but it fired right up. Be a good article. It'd be a good story for Ford. It was about a 30-year-old truck, fired right up. Everything was melted in the front. Yeah, anything we left outside survived. Looks good. Unfortunately, it was all the old junk. I should have put all the old junk inside the building, left the good stuff out. What happened in New Mexico when that fire hit? They called and said, "What do you think?" We're thinking of loading everything on lowboys and getting it out of Dodge and taking it to where the fire is in. And I said, that's not a bad idea when you would consider your new snowcats are $400,000 or $500,000 a piece. Not a bad idea. And it's not just that if they're insured, trying to replace them and find that
Right.
equipment. And our boneyard was completely burned to the ground, and everything in it was just torched, which actually we kind of needed to clean it up anyway. So when we were able to submit a claim for it, so that was kind of a win. But everything in the parking and the paved parking areas, not touched.
We're going to pave paradise and put up a fire break.
Yeah.
So what,
Tom?
sorry, one question on that is, what do you recommend as the distance from the edge of the parking if you're going to do that? So people that do that understand what the distance.
In the middle.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Tom?
you need it in the middle, but how far should they be separated from the edge so that if there is a fire there is a separation zone?
Yeah. Tom wants to know because he's looking at getting first chair the next day. So where's he supposed to park?
I think it depends on how much vegetation near the ground you have. In our case, they were tall trees on tree islands in between the lots, but we did park everything down the middle. And, you can park 6 wide in our parking lots. So, figure 20-foot spaces in fire lanes. So, using the middle obviously is safer. Depends on which way the wind's blowing, which direction the fire's going to. If the fire's coming at you. One thing we found interesting, side-by-side lifts built by the previous owner. The fire went underneath, went in the crown, burned all the shivs and the comm lines and really torched that lift. Then it went on the ground, crawled over 50 feet underneath that next one and came back up the other side and kept going and left that lift alone.
Huh.
Side by side, we had one lift destroyed and one lift left.
So I'm sorry. So it all depends on the wind speed also. So, right. So if the higher wind speed, you may not be able to survive anyway,
and the fuels are, if you're in a crown fire, that's a whole different situation. Yeah. If it's a ground fire, in this case, the crown fire, the flames are being pushed by the winds, generating its own wind and essentially, just torching everything. But when it was on the ground, it was fine. We did have one lift tower that was completely blackened, and we found that the foundation actually had tree stumps had grown around it. Fire got into those tree stumps, and we had to dig an entirely new foundation for that one tower. There was a lot of key findings like that. There's nothing we could have done to prevent that, So,
John, I have a question. This may wrap it up, but that owner that said throw in the towel. Can you tell me what changed the mind, or what did you do to finally convince him that we're going to be open by the next season?
We're going to do this. And he goes, how? And I said, we're going to leverage every relationship we built and everything we've done, paying it forward. And we're going to find a way out of this. And that's my promise to you, because it was a big investment for him. And he said, okay, keep me posted. And I'm out of here. I can't even breathe the smoke. I kept him up to speed. I didn't want to overpromise. I was very honest about what was happening. I sent pictures and videos as I could, and media clips and things to help him understand where we were. And they were extremely appreciative that we January 4th of last year. The reason I could take this job was I had found a new person to manage the resort, but I came up from the backside on a key day, and the parking lot was completely full, and there was a line of cars snaking to get in. And I said, "That's it. my work is done. If you think they will come, I'm out of here." So it's the only reason I could leave. I promised the owners I wouldn't walk out on them until that thing was back on its feet. And they sold out 5 times last winter. Now they're far from being back. A lot of people went to other resorts. We lost a ton of employees because we were closed for one winter to other resorts. And we're slowly getting some of them back. But communicating with our loyal pass holders and guests was really important too, through social media and that. So they knew every step of what we were doing. We had a trash cleanup day every year we do as part of our sustainability, where they come and help us pick up trash. We take them up the chair. After the fire, for them to see it and understand the depth of what we had really helped them to truly get it and be appreciative. And I couldn't walk 20 feet without somebody going, "Thank you so much for saving our resort." So,
Well, John and Gwyn, thank you so much for being our guests and talking about sustainability, talking about resilience. And these are resilient people here, you can tell, because they keep asking questions. Tom, Alan, you got something really quick?
Real quick, the Garnet Fire, I think it's called the Garnet Fire, is the largest in California right now at like 100 and a couple thousand acres. And it's not near a ski resort, luckily. I just did the Cal Fire.
It's very close to the shadow of the Creek Fire that consumed everything except China Peak. And the only reason China Peak didn't burn, everything around it burned, was because the forest had staged in the lot.
Maybe he who shall not be named will let the water flow from the northwest again.
Hey, Dave, I want to make one comment.
Yeah.
Gwen, you're interested in the possibility of using forest refuse for power. That was my business, selling power plants to sawmills. And if you go down to Burlington, take a right on 20 and go towards Anacortes, turn off on the Farm to Market Road, you're right in front of the Sierra Pacific sawmill.
Yeah.
That entire sawmill is powered from wood waste.
I drive by it all the time.
All right, well,
On my way to the Longhorn Tavern.
well, stop there before you go to the tavern, but they would probably be more than happy to give you a tour. That's a far more sophisticated plant than you would need, but that's a good place to start.
Great.
All
Thank
right.
you for that. Because even promoting that in our region with this new forest, plan that's going on with cleanup in the Nooksack Basin area, I think it could be an interesting tie. Thank you.
Right.
Alan, I think I'd rather tour the tavern.
Big round of applause for Mount Baker's Gwen Howat and John Rice with Ski California and the stories that they've shared. And we really appreciate your participation and support of the Far West Ski Association. We invite all of our members to join the conversation. There's where you can email us. Our website is FWSA.org. We'd love to have you volunteer, join our environment committee, and get involved in future presentations like this. So thanks, everybody. And, until next time,
Thanks for the invite.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you all.
Thank you, guys.
Bye now.
Great work. Great work.
Thank you.
Amazing.
Later.
You can stop recording now.